The rain came down hard that Thursday evening, turning the parking garage into an echo chamber of drumming water and squealing tires. David pulled his security jacket tighter as he made his usual rounds through Level B of Riverside Mall. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows between the concrete pillars. It was almost 8 o'clock, and most shoppers had already gone home to their warm houses and hot dinners. David had been working this security job for nearly 8 months now. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't what he dreamed about when he was younger, but it paid the bills. Well, most of them anyway. After the manufacturing plant where he'd worked for 6 years shut down, he'd been grateful to find anything at all. At 32 years old, starting over wasn't easy, but he showed up every day and did his job with pride. As he walked past the payment kiosk near the exit ramp, something caught his attention. An older gentleman stood there, patting his pockets with increasing urgency. The man looked to be in his 70s, wearing a gray suit that had seen better days. His white hair was dampened by the rain, and his glasses kept sliding down his nose as he bent forward, checking his pockets again and again. David slowed his pace, watching for a moment. The man's hands were shaking slightly as he checked his jacket pockets, then his pants pockets, then back to his jacket again. There was something desperate in the way he moved, like someone who'd just realized they'd lost something important. "Evening, sir," David called out, approaching slowly. "Everything all right?" The old man looked up, and David could see the worry etched across his weathered face. "Oh, thank goodness. Maybe you can help me. I seem to have lost my wallet." David stepped closer, noting the parking ticket clutched in the man's hand. "Lost it in the mall, you think?" "I don't know," the man said, running a hand through his wet hair. "I had it when I went into the drugstore upstairs. Picked up my prescription, but now it's just gone. I've checked everywhere." The parking kiosk beeped impatiently, its screen showing the amount due. $8. Not a fortune by any means, but David knew from experience that $8 could matter a lot depending on your situation. "Could it be in your car?" David suggested. The old man shook his head. "I already checked twice. I think maybe I dropped it somewhere between the drugstore and here, but I can't go back and look now. I have a meeting across town in 40 minutes, and with this traffic..." He gestured helplessly at the rain-soaked evening outside. David could see the genuine distress in the man's eyes. This wasn't someone trying to scam their way out of a parking fee. This was just a person having a really bad day, the kind of day where one small problem feels like it might be the thing that breaks you. "What's your name, sir?" David asked. "William," the old man replied. "William Hartwell. And I know this sounds ridiculous. It's only $8. But I don't have any cash on me, obviously, and without my credit cards..." He trailed off, looking embarrassed. David knew that feeling. He'd been there himself more times than he cared to remember. Times when a small amount of money stood between him and something he desperately needed to do. The difference was, he happened to have his wallet in his pocket right now. "Don't worry about it," David said, pulling out his debit card. "I've got you covered." William's eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly..." "It's no problem, really." David was already sliding his card into the machine. The kiosk beeped its acceptance and the gate arm began to rise. "Young man, this is incredibly kind of you," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise I'll pay you back. I absolutely insist on it." David waved his hand dismissively. "We've all been there, right? Don't worry about it." But William was already patting his chest pocket, pulling out a slightly damp business card. "Please at least let me get your information. Your name and number. I'm not the kind of man who forgets a debt." There was something in William's tone that made David pause. It wasn't pride exactly, but a deep sense of honor. This was clearly a man who believed in keeping his word, and David didn't want to insult him by refusing completely. "All right," David agreed, taking the pen William offered. He wrote his name and cell phone number on the back of the card in his careful handwriting. "But honestly, don't stress about it. Just $8. William studied the card for a moment, then looked up at David with an intensity that was almost unsettling. "David Chen," he read aloud. "Well, David, you've done more for me tonight than you probably realize. This meeting I'm going to, it's important, very important, and you've just saved me from missing it." "Glad I could help," David said with a genuine smile. "Drive safe out there. Roads are slick tonight." William shook his hand firmly, his grip surprisingly strong for his age. "Thank you, David. Truly, I won't forget this." As William drove away into the rainy night, his taillights disappearing down the exit ramp, David stood there for a moment. $8. That was about what he'd spend on lunch tomorrow. Maybe a sandwich and a soda from the food court. It wasn't going to break him, and something about the encounter had felt right. Good even. He resumed his rounds, checking the stairwells and making sure all the doors were secure. The rain continued its steady drumbeat overhead, and the mall slowly emptied out as closing time approached. By the time his shift ended at 10, David had almost forgotten about the encounter entirely. Walking to his own car, a 12-year-old sedan with a temperamental engine and a crack across the windshield, David thought about his own problems. Rent was due in a week. His mom needed help with her medical bills again. The check engine light had come on yesterday, which probably meant another expensive repair he couldn't really afford. But as he started his car and listened to it cough and sputter before finally turning over, David felt okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. He'd helped someone tonight. That counted for something, didn't it? Even if he never saw William again, even if those $8 never came back to him, he'd done the right thing. That had to be worth something in this world. It had to be. 3 weeks passed and David's life didn't get any easier. If anything, it got harder. It started with a letter from his landlord slipped under his apartment door on a Monday morning. Rent was going up by $200 a month starting next month. $200. David read the letter 3 times, hoping the numbers would somehow change, but they stayed exactly the same. He sat at his small kitchen table, calculator in hand, running the numbers over and over. No matter how he added it up, the math didn't work in his favor. His phone rang while he was still staring at the calculator. It was his mom. "Hi, honey," she said, and he could hear the tiredness in her voice. "I hate to bother you, but I got the bill from the hospital today. For that test they ran last month, insurance didn't cover as much as they said they would." David closed his eyes. "How much, Mom?" $470. "I know you've been helping me already, and I feel terrible asking, but..." "Don't feel terrible," David interrupted gently. "I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it, okay?" After they hung up, David put his head in his hands. $470, plus the $200 extra for rent, plus his own bills, plus groceries. He picked up extra shifts whenever he could, but there were only so many hours in a week. Only so many hours his body could handle standing and walking through that parking garage. His girlfriend, Lisa, came over that evening with takeout. She found him at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and bank statements. "Baby, you need to eat something," she said, setting down the bag of Chinese food. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" David tried to remember. "I had ramen for lunch. That doesn't count." Lisa sat down across from him, her dark eyes full of concern. "David, you can't keep living like this. Have you heard back from any of those applications you sent out?" He'd sent out 43 applications over the past 2 months. 43. Everything from warehouse positions to office jobs to delivery driving. He'd gotten exactly 0 responses, not counting the automated rejection emails. "Nothing yet," he said quietly. "Maybe you should try the temp agencies again. Or maybe..." "I can't risk losing what I have," David said more sharply than he intended. "The security job isn't great, but it's steady. I know what I'm getting every 2 weeks. If I quit and try something else, what if it doesn't work out? Then I have nothing." Lisa reached across the table and took his hand. "I know, I'm sorry. I just hate seeing you like this." They ate in silence for a while. The lo mein tasted like cardboard in David's mouth, but he forced himself to eat it. Lisa was right. He needed to take care of himself. 2 days later, his car started making a horrible grinding noise. David pulled into a repair shop on his way home from work, praying it wasn't anything serious. The mechanic, a guy named Tony who'd fixed his car before, looked under the hood and shook his head. "Brake pads are shot," Tony said. "And your rotors need replacing, too. You really should have brought it in sooner." "How much?" David asked, though he already knew he didn't want to hear the answer. "Parts and labor? About $500. David felt something inside his chest tighten. "Can I get away with just the brake pads for now?" Tony gave him a look. "I wouldn't recommend it. Your rotors are warped pretty bad. It's not safe, but it'll work? The car will stop?" "Yeah, it'll work, but..." "Just the brake pads then," David said firmly. "I'll come back for the rotors when I can." The repair cost him $250, which he put on his credit card. The credit card that was already close to maxed out. As he drove away, the car still made a slight noise when he braked, but at least it stopped. That was something. The following week, David's supervisor called him into the office. Jerry was a decent guy, late 50s, with a beer belly and a mustache that looked like it belonged in an old Western movie. He gestured for David to sit down, and the look on his face told David this wasn't good news. Corporate's cutting costs, Jerry said without preamble. They're reducing security hours across all their properties by 30%. David's stomach dropped. 30%? Starting next month. I fought it, David, I really did. You're one of my best guys, but they've made up their minds. Jerry pulled out a paper and slid it across the desk. This shows your new schedule. Instead of 40 hours a week, you'll be getting about 28. David stared at the paper. 28 hours. That was 12 hours a week he was losing, 12 hours of pay. He did the quick math in his head and felt sick. I'm sorry, kid, Jerry said, and he actually looked sorry. If it was up to me, I'd keep you full-time. Is there any other work? David asked. Different shifts? Other locations? Jerry shook his head. They're cutting everywhere. I wish I had better news. That night, David sat in his apartment alone. Lisa was working a late shift at the hospital where she was a nurse. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of his neighbors arguing upstairs. He pulled out his calculator again and ran the numbers with his reduced hours. Even if he cut out everything that wasn't absolutely essential, even if he lived on ramen and rice for every meal, the math just didn't work. He'd be short every month, and that wasn't even accounting for emergencies, which seemed to happen more and more often lately. David thought about that night in the parking garage 3 weeks ago. The old man, William, who'd lost his wallet. David had given him $8 without thinking twice. It had seemed like nothing at the time. Just $8. Just helping someone who needed it now, sitting in his dim apartment with bills spread across the table and a calculator showing numbers that didn't add up. No matter how many times he pressed the buttons, David wondered if he'd been foolish. $8 wouldn't solve his problems now, but it could have bought him a few meals. It could have paid for gas to get to work. He wasn't angry at William. He didn't regret helping him. But sitting there in the darkness, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders, David couldn't help but think about that moment differently. He'd helped a stranger while barely being able to help himself. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. You okay? Haven't heard from you today, David typed back. I'm fine. Just tired. Love you. He wasn't fine, though. He was drowning. And he didn't know how to ask for help because everyone around him was drowning too. His mom, Lisa, working double shifts. His friends from the old factory who were all struggling to find decent work. David turned off the lights and went to bed early. Tomorrow was another shift. Another day of walking through that parking garage, checking doors, helping people with locked cars or dead batteries. Another day of showing up and doing his job even though it was barely enough. He'd keep going. What other choice did he have? 4 weeks after that rainy night in the parking garage, David was eating his lunch in the security break room when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer it. Unknown numbers were usually spam calls trying to sell him extended car warranties or telling him his social security number had been suspended. But something made him swipe to answer. Hello? Is this David Chen? A woman's voice, professional and clear. Yeah, this is David. Who's calling? My name is Patricia Mills. I'm the executive assistant to the CEO of Hartwell Technologies. I'm calling because my employer, Mr. William Hartwell, has been trying to locate you. David nearly dropped his sandwich. I'm sorry, what? William Hartwell, Patricia repeated patiently. He asked me to track you down. You work security at Riverside Mall, is that correct? Yeah, I do, but I don't understand. Mr. Hartwell would like to meet with you at our headquarters. Would you be available next Tuesday at 10 in the morning? David's mind was racing. William Hartwell, the old man from the parking garage, the one who'd lost his wallet. But Hartwell Technologies? That was one of the biggest tech companies in the state. He'd seen their buildings downtown, these massive glass towers that touched the clouds. I'm confused, David said slowly. The William Hartwell I met was he was an older guy who lost his wallet. Are we talking about the same person? Patricia's voice carried a hint of amusement. We are indeed talking about the same person, Mr. Chen. William Hartwell is our CEO and founder. He's very eager to speak with you. About what? He didn't share the details with me, but he was quite insistent that I find you. So Tuesday at 10, I can send you the address and parking information. David looked around the break room with its flickering fluorescent light and the microwave that only worked half the time. None of this made sense. I have to work Tuesday morning. This meeting is quite important to Mr. Hartwell. Perhaps you could arrange to have that morning off. David thought about his reduced hours, about Jerry telling him they were cutting shifts. Yeah, I guess I could. But are you sure this isn't some kind of prank or something? I assure you, Mr. Chen, this is completely legitimate. Check your email. I'm sending you the details right now. After they hung up, David sat there staring at his phone. His email pinged, and sure enough, there was a message from Patricia Mills with an official Hartwell Technologies email signature. The address was for their main headquarters downtown. He immediately called Lisa. "You're not going to believe this," he said when she answered. After he explained everything, there was a long silence on the other end. "David, that's insane. William Hartwell is like a billionaire. Why would he want to meet with you?" "I have no idea. Maybe he really wants to pay me back that $8. David tried to joke, but his voice was shaky. "This is huge. What are you going to wear? You don't have a suit." David looked down at his security uniform. She was right. He owned exactly 2 pairs of jeans, some t-shirts, his work uniform, and one button-up shirt he'd worn to a wedding 3 years ago. "I'll figure something out," he said. That weekend, David borrowed a suit from his friend Kevin, who was about his size. The pants were a little short and the jacket was a little tight, but it would have to do. He spent Saturday night looking up Hartwell Technologies online, trying to understand what he was walking into. William Hartwell's face stared at him from dozens of articles. There he was, the same man from the parking garage, except in these photos he was wearing expensive suits and standing next to presidents and celebrities. The articles talked about his rise from nothing, building a tech empire from a small startup in his garage. They mentioned his philanthropy, the hospitals and schools he'd funded. His net worth was estimated at $3.7 billion. $3.7 billion. And David had paid $8 for his parking. He barely slept Monday night. His mind kept spinning with possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Maybe William wanted to hire him as personal security. Maybe he wanted to thank him publicly. Or maybe this was all a huge mistake, and David would show up to find out they'd contacted the wrong person. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold. David put on Kevin's suit, tied the tie 3 times before getting it right, and drove downtown. His car made that grinding noise the whole way, reminding him that he still needed to fix those rotors. The Hartwell Technologies building was even more impressive up close. 40 stories of gleaming glass and steel, with a lobby that looked like something from a science fiction movie. David felt completely out of place as he walked in, his cheap shoes squeaking on the marble floor. He gave his name to the security desk, half expecting them to laugh and tell him to leave. Instead, the guard checked his computer, nodded, and handed David a visitor badge. "Ms. Mills will be down shortly," the guard said. David waited in the lobby, watching important-looking people in expensive suits hurry past with their phones and briefcases. Everyone looked like they belonged here. Everyone except him. Patricia Mills appeared exactly 5 minutes later. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than David made in a month. "Mr. Chen, pleasure to meet you in person," she said, shaking his hand. "Please follow me." They rode an elevator to the 40th floor. The top floor? David's ears popped from the altitude. Patricia made polite conversation about the weather, but David could barely focus on her words. His heart was hammering in his chest. The elevator opened directly into a reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. David could see the mall where he worked, tiny in the distance. "Mr. Hartwell is expecting you," Patricia said, leading him down a hallway with thick carpet that swallowed the sound of their footsteps. She opened a door to an office that was bigger than David's entire apartment. Windows on 2 walls showed the city sprawling. Below, there was a massive desk, leather furniture, and standing by the window looking out at the view was William. He turned around when they entered, and his face broke into a warm smile. "David," he said, walking forward with his hand extended, "thank you so much for coming. Please sit down." William looked different from that night in the parking garage. He wore an expensive suit now, perfectly tailored. His hair was neatly combed. He carried himself with confidence and authority, but his eyes were the same, kind and sharp. David shook his hand and sat in one of the leather chairs, feeling like he might slide right off it. "Mr. Hartwell, I have to admit I'm really confused about why I'm here." William sat across from him, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I imagine you are, and please call me William. I owe you an explanation, and more importantly, I owe you my thanks." "Thanks for what? $8? William smiled. "It's much more than that, David, much more. That night we met, I wasn't lost. Well, my wallet wasn't really lost. It was in my car the whole time. I just didn't check properly because I was flustered." David blinked. "I don't understand." "I was testing myself," William said quietly. "I'd been retired for 2 years and I was considering coming back to run the company again. But I'd been worried that I'd lost touch with regular people, with how the world actually works for most folks. So I left my wallet in my car on purpose that night. I wanted to see what would happen if I couldn't rely on my money or my name." "That's why you looked so ordinary," David said slowly. "The old suit, everything." "Exactly. And then you came along." William's voice grew emotional. "You didn't know who I was. You had no idea. And you helped me anyway. $8 might not seem like much, but I had my team look into your background, David. I know you're not rich. I know you struggle. And yet you gave freely." David felt his face flush. Someone had investigated him. "You looked into my life. I wanted to understand who you were," William said. "And what I found impressed me greatly." David sat frozen in the leather chair, trying to process what William had just told him. Someone had investigated his life, his struggles, his bills, everything. He didn't know whether to feel honored or violated. "I know that might sound invasive," William continued, reading the expression on David's face. "And I apologize if it feels that way. But I needed to know who you really were, not just on that one night, but as a person." "And what did you find?" David asked quietly. William stood up and walked to his desk, picking up a folder. "I found a man who lost his job when the factory closed but didn't give up. A man who took a security position, even though it paid half what he was making before because he needed to support his mother. A man whose supervisors all say the same thing about him. Reliable, honest, hardworking, kind to everyone he meets." David felt his throat tighten. Hearing his life summarized like that, laid out in black and white, made him realize how hard he'd been fighting just to stay afloat. "I also found out," William said, sitting back down, "that you're barely making ends meet, that your hours just got cut, that you're drowning in bills and responsibilities." He paused. "That $8 you gave me probably mattered more to you than I realized in the moment." "It was just $8, David said, but his voice cracked slightly. "No," William said firmly. "It wasn't just $8. It was a choice. You chose to help a stranger even though you were struggling yourself. You didn't know who I was. You didn't expect anything in return. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. Do you know how rare that is?" David didn't know what to say. He'd just done what felt right. William leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. "I've been in business for 40 years, David. I've met thousands of people. Executives, entrepreneurs, politicians, celebrities. And you know what I've learned? Credentials and experience matter, sure, but character matters more. Integrity matters more. How you treat people when no one's watching, when there's nothing in it for you, that's what really matters." "I still don't understand why I'm here," David admitted. William smiled. "Because I want to offer you a job." The words hung in the air between them. David stared at him, certain he'd misheard. "A job? Here, but I'm a security guard. I don't know anything about technology or business or—" "I'm not asking you to write code or manage spreadsheets," William interrupted. "I'm offering you the position of head of security operations for our entire regional division." David's mouth opened, but no words came out. Head of security operations? That sounded impossibly important, impossibly beyond anything he'd ever imagined for himself. "I don't have the qualifications," he finally managed to say. "I don't have a degree. I've never managed anyone. I just walk around a parking garage and—" "You have something more important than qualifications," William said. "You have judgment. You have integrity. You know what it's like to struggle, which means you know how to treat people with respect regardless of their position. Those are things I can't teach someone. The rest, the technical stuff, the management training, we can provide all of that." David's head was spinning. What would the job even involve? William stood up and gestured for David to follow him to the window. They looked out over the city together, the morning sun breaking through the clouds. We have 6 buildings in this region, plus several data centers and satellite offices, about 300 security personnel total. Right now, they're managed by a company that treats them like numbers on a spreadsheet. High turnover, low morale, people who show up because they have to, not because they care. I know that feeling, David said quietly. Exactly. That's why I want you. I want someone who remembers what it's like to be on the bottom, who'll treat our security staff like human beings, someone who'll build a team based on character, not just credentials, someone who leads by example. David turned to look at William. Why me, though, really? You could find someone with experience, with education, with, I told you. That night in the parking garage, you showed me who you are. And then I looked into your background and saw it confirmed over and over. Your old coworkers from the factory, they all spoke highly of you. Your current supervisor practically begged me not to take you away because you're one of his best people. Even your landlord, who I'm sure you think doesn't like you because he raised your rent, told my investigator that you're the most reliable tenant he has. William walked back to his desk and pulled out another paper. This is the salary and benefits package. I want you to look at it before you say anything. David took the paper with shaking hands. His eyes went to the salary line first, and he actually gasped. The number was so much higher than what he made now that he had to count the digits to make sure he was reading it correctly. It was 15 times his current salary. 15 times. Below that were the benefits. Full health insurance, dental, vision, a retirement plan with company matching, educational assistance to finish his degree if he wanted, paid vacation, sick leave. This can't be real, David whispered. It's very real. And that's just the starting salary. You'd have regular reviews, opportunities for advancement. I believe in paying people what they're worth, and I believe you're worth a lot more than what that parking garage is paying you. David sat back down heavily. His hands were trembling. This was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about, the kind of thing that didn't happen to guys like him. People like him stayed stuck in low-wage jobs, working themselves to exhaustion just to barely survive. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say you'll think about it, William suggested, though I hope you don't think too long. I'd like you to start in 2 weeks if possible. 2 weeks? David's voice squeaked. William chuckled. I know it's fast, but I'm not getting any younger, and I want to see these changes implemented properly. I'm coming back to active leadership specifically to reshape how this company operates, and security is a big part of that. I want people throughout this organization to understand that every position matters, that we value everyone from the janitors to the executives. David looked down at the paper again. The numbers blurred as his eyes filled with tears. He blinked them back quickly, embarrassed. I've been so scared, he said quietly, every month wondering if I can pay my bills, if I can help my mom, if my car will break down completely, if I'll lose my apartment. I've been working so hard and it's never enough, and I started to think maybe I'd done something wrong, made bad choices or... Stop, William said gently. You didn't do anything wrong. The system is broken, David. Good people like you shouldn't have to choose between eating and paying rent. They shouldn't have to work themselves into the ground just to survive. That's exactly why I want you in this position. You understand that in your bones. David wiped his eyes. Can I really do this? What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough, or do you remember what you said to me that night? William asked. In the parking garage. David shook his head. You said, we've all been there, right? Simple words. But they showed me you understood that we're all human, all struggling with something. That's the perspective I need. That's what will make you great at this job. William pulled out that old business card, the one David had written his name and number on that rainy night. It was worn now, the edges soft from being carried in William's wallet. I kept this as a reminder, William said. A reminder that good people still exist, that kindness still matters, and now I'm asking you to help me build something better here. Not just a company that makes money, but a company that treats people right. David looked at the card, at his own handwriting from 4 weeks ago, when he'd been just a security guard helping an old man who'd lost his wallet. That simple act had led to this moment, this impossible opportunity. I don't need to think about it, David said suddenly. Yes, my answer is yes. William's face broke into a huge smile. He stood up and extended his hand again. Welcome to Hartwell Technologies, David. I think this is the beginning of something remarkable. As David shook his hand, he felt something shift inside him. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the first time in months, maybe years. David walked out of the HOA Technologies building in a daze. The morning sun felt brighter than it had in months, or maybe that was just him. He sat in his car for a full 10 minutes before he could even turn the key. His hands were still shaking. He called Lisa first. How did it go? She asked immediately, her voice anxious. He offered me a job, David said, and then he started laughing. Not a normal laugh, but the kind of laugh that comes when you don't know whether to laugh or cry. So you do both. Lisa, you're not going to believe the salary. You're not going to believe any of this. He told her everything. When he got to the part about the salary, she went completely silent. Say something, David said. I'm sitting down, she finally replied, her voice thick with emotion. David, that's life-changing. That's everything. I know. They both cried on the phone together for a bit. Happy tears this time. His next call was to his mom. She answered on the third ring, sounding tired like she always did lately. Hi, baby. Aren't you supposed to be at work? Mom, I need to tell you something. And he told her the whole story from that rainy night 4 weeks ago to the meeting this morning. When he finished, there was a long silence. Mom? You still there? I'm here. Her voice was barely a whisper. David, I've been so worried about you. Watching you struggle, not being able to help. I felt so guilty that you're supporting me when you can barely support yourself. Don't, David said firmly. Don't feel guilty. You raised me by yourself after Dad left. You worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. It's my turn now. And Mom, that medical bill you were worried about? Don't worry about it anymore. I've got it covered. She broke down completely then, sobbing on the other end of the phone. I'm so proud of you, David. So proud. David gave his notice at the mall that afternoon. Jerry, his supervisor, looked sad but not surprised. I knew you wouldn't be with us forever, Jerry said, shaking his hand. You're too good for this place. I'm happy for you, kid, really. Thanks for giving me a chance when I needed it, David said. That mattered. The 2 weeks before starting his new job passed in a blur. David used his last paycheck and a small advance William had arranged to take care of immediate problems. He paid his mom's medical bill. He got his car properly fixed. He bought a real suit that actually fit him. He even took Lisa out to a nice dinner, not takeout, not fast food, but a real restaurant with tablecloths and everything. I keep waiting to wake up, Lisa said over dessert. Like this is all going to turn out to be a dream. If it is, don't wake me up, David replied, squeezing her hand. His first day at HOA Technologies was terrifying. Patricia met him in the lobby and took him up to his new office. His office. It had a window, a real desk, a computer, and a nameplate that said, David Chen, Head of Security Operations. Your team leads are waiting in the conference room, Patricia said. Whenever you're ready. David took a deep breath and walked into the conference room. 7 people sat around the table, all older than him, all looking skeptical. He recognized that look. They were wondering who this kid was, why he'd been put in charge of them. Good morning, David said, standing at the head of the table. My name is David Chen, and I'm sure you're all wondering what qualifies me to be here. A few uncomfortable shifts in seats. The truth is, not much. I don't have fancy degrees. I've never managed anyone before. Until 2 weeks ago, I was a security guard at a shopping mall. He saw some eyebrows raise. But I do know what it's like to work a job where nobody notices you unless something goes wrong. Where you're treated like you don't matter, and I'm here to tell you that's going to change. One of the older guys, a man with gray hair and a skeptical expression, spoke up. With all due respect, son, we've heard that before. Every new manager comes in talking about changes and nothing changes. You're right to be skeptical, David said. I would be too, so I'm not going to make a bunch of promises. Instead, I'm going to ask you to help me. You know this operation better than I ever will. I want to learn from you. I want to know what's broken and how we can fix it together. The room was quiet for a moment. Then a woman at the far end of the table spoke up. The overnight shift at Building C has been short-staffed for 6 months. We keep asking for more people, but it never happens. Those guards are exhausted and it's dangerous. David pulled out a notebook. Tell me everything. They talked for 2 hours. David filled pages with notes about problems, concerns, and ideas. Things he wouldn't have known to ask about, but they needed to tell someone who would actually listen. Over the next 6 months, David learned more than he'd learned in his entire life. He made mistakes, lots of them, but William had paired him with mentors who helped him through the rough patches. He took online courses at night about management and security systems. He spent time working alongside the security guards at every building, doing shifts with them, learning what their days were really like. And slowly, things changed. David implemented new scheduling that ended the short staffing problems. He increased pay across the board for all security personnel. He created a system where guards could report concerns without fear. He hired people like him, people who didn't have perfect resumes but had good character and strong work ethic. One evening, 6 months into the job, William stopped by David's office. "How's it going?" he asked, settling into a chair. "Hard," David admitted. "But good." "Really good," William smiled. "I've been hearing excellent things. Morale is up. Turnover is down. You're doing exactly what I hoped you'd do." David hesitated, then pulled open his desk drawer. He took out his wallet and removed $8 in cash. "I've been meaning to give this back to you." William looked at the money and laughed. "David, I don't want it, I know, but I wanted you to see that I paid you back. In my own way. Maybe I never could fully pay you back for what you did for me, but I want you to know I haven't forgotten where I came from." William took the $8 and held it for a moment, then handed it back. "Keep it, frame it. Let it remind you that small acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we can't imagine. You gave me $8 when you could barely afford it. I gave you an opportunity. Now you're giving opportunities to others. That's how it's supposed to work." David looked at the $8 in his hand. Such a small thing. Such a meaningless amount in the grand scheme of things. And yet it had changed everything. "Can I tell you something?" David said quietly. "That night in the parking garage, I almost didn't help you. I was having a bad day, worried about money, and part of me thought about just walking past. But you didn't," William said. "No, I didn't. And I'm so glad I didn't." William stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "You know what the best part is? The people you've hired, the ones you gave chances to, they're going to help someone someday too. You're creating a chain reaction of kindness. That's worth more than any amount of money." After William left, David sat alone in his office for a while. He looked out the window at the city below, at the distant mall where he used to work. He thought about the person he'd been 6 months ago, desperate and struggling and scared. He thought about all the security guards he'd hired, people like Raymond who'd been homeless for a year before David gave him a chance, people like Angela who was a single mom working 3 jobs until David brought her on with a decent salary, people who just needed someone to see their potential. David took out his phone and texted Lisa. "Still can't believe this is real," she texted back immediately. "Believe it. You earned it," but David knew better. He hadn't earned it. Not really. He'd just done one small kind thing for a stranger on a rainy night, expecting nothing in return. And somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. He taped the $8 to his desk right where he could see it every day. A reminder that you never know when a simple act of kindness might change everything. A reminder that helping someone, even in a small way, always matters. A reminder that sometimes the smallest things we do are actually the biggest things of all.